Well, hello everybody. Hello and welcome to the newest episode of CyberJar live streaming with Kat. Today I'm joined by a great person. He's a software engineer, not just software engineer, but a senior software engineer, and not just a senior software engineer, but a freelance senior software engineer. Right. And also Vaadin champion. Um, we met some time ago, and we were talking about Vaadin and found out that we have lots of things to talk about. And we decided to make this live stream happen. So please welcome René Wilby. Hello, René.
Hi, Kat. Thank you very much for inviting me and thank you for the introduction. Very happy to be here and really looking forward to our chat and to our discussion about
Yeah,
full stack.
thank you. Thank you for joining us. Friends, please say hello in the chat, say where you are joining us from. And of course, during our discussion, any feedback is welcome. So share your stories on full stack, whether you are thinking about going full stack or whether you gave up doing full stack or whether you are currently working as a full stack engineer. What are your thoughts? And if you have any questions to René or to me, feel free to shoot them at us. Hello, Masha, joining from Balkans. Wow.
Hi.
Hello, Masha. And the recording will be available on the YouTube channel. So if you miss part of this session or the whole session, no worries. You can watch it later. So, René, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, sure. I'm actually quite into this whole Java ecosystem for quite a while now. I think it's been almost 20 years when I had my first contact with Java. It was actually during an internship where I was developing a small web application, which was surprisingly hosted on an IBM WebSphere, which was part of an iSeries IBM system. So very big system, not much what we are talking about nowadays when it comes to deploying web applications, but it was very interesting. And I never really lost track on Java and web development. I had some different roles in the past. So I worked as a consultant or software development consultant. I've been also working as a product manager from some time, but I was still somehow related to Java development and to development in general. So I would not only just touch Java, I also had a lot of contact with other programming languages like PHP, for example. But somehow I discovered that I really like web development. So I started to create business web apps during the time as a consultant. And I'm also doing this now as a freelance software engineer. And those web applications I usually build with Java and Spring Boot in the back end. And sometimes I use Java on the front end as well, which is kind of nice. And we can talk about this today, how we can use Java on the front end. But I also use things like React or TypeScript, for example. And in the past, I've been also working as an engineer that built mobile applications. So I'm also a little bit familiar in creating platform independent mobile applications, which was kind of interesting because this was how I got to know React, which I'm still using today for web applications. But I actually used React the first time when I was building mobile applications using React Native. And I somehow fell in love with React, and I'm still stuck to it. So yes, and that's what I'm doing actually. So as a freelance software engineer, I'm also working on web apps, but also on things like microservices. Sometimes I'm just a regular Java backend engineer wrangling on some microservices, and it's not always about full stack, but I really like this topic, and that's why I'm happy to be here and talk about it today.
Well, great. You have so much expertise in so many fields. I mean, that's just wonderful because I know Java and I want to learn something else for maybe React or Rust, but
Yeah.
to go your way, that's wow, that's a lot. So you started as a backend developer, right? And then you shifted into front end also. So why is that? Were you bored with backend, or just were craving for something entirely new?
Well, curiosity is a big part in this. That's actually right because I was always interested in understanding a software like end to end. So I was not just interested in building backend systems and APIs. I was always interested in to understand how people use systems. What's going to be the purpose of the system or a functionality? And that's why I was always interested in full stack development or in front end development, because this is usually the touch point to the users or to the customers. Whether it's a web application or mobile application, the user interaction usually happens there. And so I was always curious about this. And back in the days when I was working as a software development consultant, we had a few quite tiny projects where I was sometimes even alone on the project, which means that I was confronted with realizing a project end to end. So I was the guy talk to talk through the requirements the customers had, and I had to put them into a system design and then create something out of it, like a web application or mobile app. And this, of course, included building the front end and the back end, and then of course getting this somehow shipped to production. And this is of course more for small projects or for MVP projects, but this way I really liked or really enjoyed working full stack, and I really enjoyed it, and I don't want to give up on it. But yes, it can be difficult in bigger projects to work like this, but maybe we'll come to this later. But yeah, that's actually how I joined the full stack world. Yeah.
So that's that's nice, but can you maybe tell me what full stack actually means to you, being a full stack developer yourself? How would you define this term?
Yes, it's a little bit difficult, and of course, it depends who you ask, because full stack can mean that you see a feature end to end, and if this feature maybe just requires something that is related to a microservice and another microservice, then you may be working on the full stack that is involved in implementing a feature. But usually applications have a broader stack, which has something like a back end and a front end. And so for me, full stack at least means covering the entire stack that is required to implement a functionality. So if a user has a desire for a certain functionality in a web application or mobile application, and this needs to be implemented, then there are usually aspects in the UI, and there are also aspects in the back end. And so usually full stack means you take care of the front end and the back end. But as you know, it's not just about the software development. There's also the requirements engineering part. So getting to know what the user really wants. So talking to users, understanding their needs, understanding their requirement, putting this in a system design. This is for me also a part of full stack development, because it covers the part or the journey of understanding what a user really wants and to understand the business value or the business purpose of a feature that you are going to implement. And in addition to that, when you've understood it and when you've implemented it in the front end and in the back end, you usually also need to get this feature to the users. So the software itself is not helpful when it resides as an artifact in some kind of repository. So it needs to be out there. You need to deploy it somehow. So all what we can summarize under CI/CD or full stack or DevOps is somehow related to full stack for me as well. I know that people hesitate to say that DevOps is also part of full stack because it makes the whole system even more complex. I know that.
Yeah.
So working with DevOps and getting into it is certainly something that you really need to like, or because it's maybe even driven out of curiosity, because it's usually not part of what many people understand about full stack. But I would summarize, for me personally, full stack means end to end. So understanding the user, the requirements engineering, the implementation, the backend and the front end, and as well bringing this somehow into production and even monitor it and look at it and ensure that it's served in a very productive manner. So the complete stack is very, very broad.
Yeah, understanding is a very, very good word in this case. And I would also say maybe that not only understanding the user needs, but also understanding the responsibilities of other team members, right?
Yeah.
Understanding how they work, what they work on, and what are the well, not intricacies, but maybe complexities of their work. So, for instance, I remember when I first started coding, that was just a purely backend job, and we had some front end ready. And well, it was written in JavaScript as far as I remember, and I didn't know JavaScript back then. But who am I kidding? I still don't know JavaScript. Let's be honest. Yeah. But anyway, so there was this front end ready, and we were said, okay, just don't touch it, don't do anything with it. That's none of your business. Just write your part of a backend. And for me back then, that felt well, I felt really uncomfortable and uneasy because there is a major part of the project that I'm not related to in any way, that I don't even understand. It's like it's written in Chinese or something. So that's you're doing your job, right, as a backend developer.
Yes, yeah.
But then again, you have to know what's going on out there. And maybe in this case, you can improve your work as a backend developer, or maybe you can make life easier for front end guys. So, for instance, I'm sure there are some mistakes that backend devs do that annoy front end devs, and vice versa. Are there
Yeah,
something?
yes, absolutely. And just to make one thing clear, to point on something, being full stack does not mean that one single developer has to be full stack. It can, in a project, it can also mean that you have a full stack team. So there are always preferences for in every developer's life. So even if you say you have a full stack team, for example, where everyone is supposed to work on every side of the project, then you usually have preferences. So you have people that really like the back end and you have people that like the front end. But if you consider a full stack approach, you assume that they can switch between their roles. So the back end guys can work on the front end and vice versa. And if you split that up, like in the example you gave, so you have a dedicated backend team and you have a dedicated front-end team, then a whole lot of problems usually arise out of that. One you just mentioned is you don't feel really responsible for the whole product. And if you're working in an agile environment, I think full stack really brings a lot of advantages to the table in an agile environment, because it really helps a team to work in this, you own it, you build it, you run it methodology, because you want to own a product and you want to own it end to end. And this means you don't want to create a backend and throw a specification over the wall and let somebody else implement the front end, because then you don't own the product, then you just own a very small part of it, which can be fine in very large companies, but in smaller companies or mid-sized companies, usually teams can own a product end to end, I think, especially when they have a full stack team. And when you consider working on such projects as a full stack team, then you have a lot of advantages. So you feel what you own it, you have a responsibility for it, and you can reduce a lot of communication overhead, which is something that I see very, very often in my projects. When you have a dedicated backend and dedicated front-end team, that there's a lot of communication going on between them about specification, about responsibilities, about deadlines, about versioning, deployments, etc. So this usually takes this eats a huge, well, not a huge amount, but a large amount of the overall time and budget, all this communication back and forth. And this is something that you can usually reduce when you have more autonomy in one team and when you have the communication within the team and not between different teams with different managers and different deadlines. Yeah.
But can one actually be the expert, the top expert in both fields? Can one do a great front end stuff with CSS, layouts, design, whatever, and the back end with authentication, SQL, transactions, observability? Or still that's a little bit being superfluous in both things? So,
Yes, that's definitely one of the challenges you have in this area. Absolutely, and especially when you try to do this all on your own. So if you're a single developer trying to do full stack, then I guess it's pretty hard to know all of that in detail in the back end and in the front end. So either you are very smart or you have a lot of time to work to study and to gather knowledge, or you have simpler projects, or you can use tools like coding agents, for example, that can help you out so that you can extend your knowledge by asking a coding agent specific things that you don't know. But as a full stack engineer, you maybe know the area so that it's easier for you to understand what an AI, for example, suggests for an authentication mechanism for a single page application. So if you're just a backend engineer, for example, and you ask an AI about an authentication mechanism for a web app, then maybe you don't know if it's a reasonable approach the AI had. But if you have an understanding of this whole ecosystem or of this whole architecture because you are interested in full stack, then you usually are able to understand whether it's a good suggestion or a bad one. And going back to the full stack teams, the complexity, of course, can be shared across many shoulders in full stack teams. So, for example, if you say you have a full stack team, but you maybe have these subject matter experts that are, that they are part of a full stack team, but maybe they have time to specialize on certain aspects. So they can help each other because they work in the same team. But for example, if you have this very challenging CSS task, then there's this one developer in the team that is usually the one that can take this very difficult tasks. But not all of the tasks are so challenging and so difficult. We have a lot of tasks that usually many people can do, and this is again one of the advantages that you can shift your resources. So, for example, if you have a product iteration where the focus is more on back end and less on front end, you can shift the resources of a full stack team more into this back end direction, which is difficult when you only have front end engineers they will have a hard time just to work one iteration on back end stuff if they are not full stack. But yes, of course, going back to your original question, keeping up to date with all what's going on in the whole ecosystem and becoming an expert in all of this is very difficult, and maybe it's even impossible, but it really depends on the situation and on the character. But I'm trying my best.
Well, I'm just dying to ask my next question on actually navigating the landscape of technologies and on AI agent that you mentioned. But first, we have the question from the audience from Martin. When doing full stack, how to set performance budgets one can actually meet? So I guess it means, how not to how to set realistic goals in what you can do.
Yes.
The amount of
Well,
time.
performance budgets. Do you think, do you mean like application performance or team performance?
I guess team performance.
Team
Team performance, yeah.
performance. Okay, yeah. Performance. Well, I mean, team performance is something that you usually try to measure based on something like velocity, for example. So how many features you can implement within one iteration, for example. And I think one of the good things here is again that a full stack team is usually more productive than separate front-end and back-end teams. This is at least my experience, that they have less communication overhead and less external dependencies, so they can move faster. So I think the overall team performance of a full stack team can be better compared to separate teams, especially when you are interested in the result of the outcome, what those teams are building. But in general, it's difficult to give performance KPIs or performance budgets in general, because usually those kind of performance indicators, they evolve. From my experience as a team, you say you want to measure your velocity or your performance, then you usually start to track what you are doing, and you try to track the results and the outcome, and then you usually get a feeling over time how much you are able to produce within one iteration or within one product increment, for example. And this is usually something that you can then use to forecast what you are going to be able to do within the next iteration or within the next half year based on the backlog items you have as a team. But maybe that's not that much full stack related. It's more like a little bit of a general software development methodology thing here.
But speaking of performance budgets, I just thought I had an interesting thought. So AI agents can help us write code right now, and for some simple tasks, they are excellent, and they can also help us perform some more complex coding tasks. So doesn't it mean that the team lead or the product manager says, okay, you have now AI agents, and so it means that you can give more, so you can ship more because you get this help from AI agents, and so your work is doubled now.
Well, yes. Depending on the situation you are in a project, I think you could agree with the engineering manager or with the product manager saying you could create more output, because when you are in a situation where you have to do a lot of boilerplate code or initialization code, or where you have a lot of repetitive tasks that you need to implement, in those kind of situations, I think an AI can really help you to get more output, to have more output, because AI can type very fast. So you can't type that fast.
Yeah.
So if you describe it quite well, and if it's very very common what you have to achieve, then of course I think this this coding buddy in the full stack team will increase the velocity a lot. But you not always have those kind of situations. For example, if you have very complex configuration problem, or you have a very complex communication problem between the backend and the front end, of course you can ask the AI for help, but it is just somebody you ask for help, and maybe it can be helpful, maybe it won't be helpful. But yeah, so for a team, it depends on the situation. But for example, for a single developer, especially when you're a single developer going full stack and you work with clients on projects as a single developer, then I'm pretty sure that AI will boost you a lot, especially when you have not just one big client that you're working with for ages, for years and years, especially when you maybe more like a small one developer agency that is developing more kind of simple apps, for different kind of people, for different kind of businesses. So for example, you create one web app after another, and they are all somehow related, they all solve similar problems, then I guess AI can help you a lot. So for example, when you previously needed, for example, a week, then you maybe just need a day nowadays to finish this, what you've usually done in a week before, because you can just instruct the AI to do all this, what you've done previously manually, to do this automatically. So this can boost the productivity very, very much. but this is more for maybe for very independent single devs. I don't see that kind of booster in larger corporate environments. I don't see that at the moment.
Well, maybe yes, because I use AI,
Mm-hmm.
mostly ChatGPT, to maybe find solutions to some bugs. Because I will go to I will go and Google them anyway. So I paste the exception and try to find the answer to
Yeah.
that in the Google. So and ChatGPT just does that faster than I do, and it provides the links to the sources and. Of course, if I think you work with AI with the presumption that they are wrong, then there are less risks that you will vibe code something hideous.
Yes.
Yeah, so some simple tasks, it's okay. And when I need to some maybe explore new technology, then I can also do that with the help of AI to well provide me explanation or documentation or some simple code snippets that
Mhm.
then I can explore. But that's right. That's good for a single dev. And in the case of a team of a production environment, does AI actually help or bring more complexity into work? Or it depends.
Well, when you are going to production, it can help you when you have a difficult setup that you need to understand. For example, so when you as we already said previously, covering the full stack is can be challenging and requires a lot of knowledge. And sometimes you have the situation where you need to do something, kind of configuration or whatever, and you know you did it before, but it's been a while that you did it the last
Yeah.
time. And this is usually previously I used Google, as you explained. So I try to formulate the question because my brain somehow needs a trigger to remember itself how I did it 2 years ago. And it can be difficult to find the right trigger or the right answer. But as you say, when you ask some, for example, ChatGPT or Copilot, about this very specific situation, then you usually get a faster, more relevant response. And especially when you kind of know what to expect because you've did it in the past, then it's easier for you to understand whether this suggestion of ChatGPT or Copilot is good or relevant. And this can help you a lot, and this can even help you when you're going to production. But again, in larger environments, especially in corporate environments, going to production also requires a lot of non-technical work, which is more, like documentation, governance, adding your application to an inventory, adding responsible people that you can call when something is wrong in production. And these are usually things you just have to kind of do manually, although it's kind of tedious to do this manually. But usually something like ChatGPT or Copilot is not yet very well integrated in those kind of governance tools. I mean, you can use AI in things like Jira or Confluence, for example, and in other things, but maybe there's still something you need to do. And this is actually fine because going to production means that you need to overlook quite a lot that is more relevant to DevOps and to production than it is actually to full stack development. And doing this is something where you need a little bit more experience or where experience is helpful. So nowadays, I feel a lot more comfortable to ship something into production than it was maybe 10 years ago because I kind of have a feeling what's involved, so to say. I don't need that much assistance here. And well, if you don't really know what to expect when going to production and you don't have any clue, for example, then of course something like ChatGPT or Copilot can help you because they can give you very good checklists. For example, this is something you can do quite often. So you have a challenge, you don't really know what to do. It's the first time you do it. Just ask for help in terms of, well, we need to go to production. What could go wrong? Please give me a checklist. What should I think about? And then those tools are brilliant at giving you ideas, giving you context, and then
Mhm.
you just have a checklist you can walk through. And maybe not everything is relevant for you, but most of it will be. And this is actually very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, for everyone who has just joined us, say hi in the chat where you're joining us from. We'll be happy to hear from you. Share your feedback, your thoughts on full stack, and of course, share your questions. We'll try to answer them. But yeah, speaking of AI, there are lots of different AI tools, but not only AI, there are so many technologies, frameworks, solutions for both backend and front end, how to actually navigate through this whole landscape and not go crazy, how to choose your perfect combination.
Yeah, that's very challenging, especially when you're completely new in this area. Um, from my personal experience and from discussions I had with other people, I know that many people get into full stack either from a backend or from a front end perspective. So usually people extend their knowledge into this full stack world coming from either front end or back end. And this can be helpful because then you know one part for sure, or you're an expert in one area. So the amount of additional load of additional knowledge is not so much at one point. So you can digest it more easily, so to say. Um, but this can help you because, for example, if you're a backend engineer, Java backend engineer, and you want also learn something about front end, then you maybe have two different approaches you can go. One thing is you can learn front end from scratch. So, for example, like you said, you would like to know more about React. So, what you could do is you could just spin up a React app using JavaScript or TypeScript. You usually would use some kind of templating mechanism or some kind of tooling. So Vite is a very good example here. So if you work with Vite and React, you can just create a new React front-end project and then just set it up. And then you can establish a communication between the front end and the back end, which will be at the beginning just HTTP fetch. So you just communicate over the air, the backend and front end, and they're very loosely coupled. So you just throw objects between the front end and the back end, and you hope everything works as expected.
Yeah.
And then you sometimes think, okay, this could be more productive, or this could be less error prone, for example. So especially when you are a backend engineer, you know your way around. You have Java, for example, you have all the type safetiness, and then you work in JavaScript, for example, in the front end, and you wonder how can people possibly ever work like this, and then you discover, for example, TypeScript. So you can then you one achievement could be to, for example, use TypeScript in the front end to have more like this type safetiness and more intelligence and static code analysis that an IDE can support you. But then you maybe discover that there is a gap between what you're doing in the front end and the back end, because you maybe have something like a bookmark application, and then you have your bookmark entity in the back end, and then you have your bookmark type in the front end, but they are not they're not related. You know, they both have the same fields because you as a developer try to keep them in common, keep them in
Mhm.
sync. But this is okay for a single dev, but this will go wrong when your code base grows or when your team grows. So you need to think of a way how to sync them better, how to combine them better. And one approach that you can then, for example, do is you can try to generate code for the front end based on what you're doing in the back end. So, for example, when you have a back end and this back end provides an API, it's very easy to get an open API specification for this API. So you can just get a machine readable API specification of all your backend operations that you are exposing. And then it's quite easy to generate TypeScript code out of it, to generate TypeScript types, to generate an API client that will communicate with your backend. And then you suddenly introduced a very tight coupling between the front end and the back end. But this is actually a good one because you want them to be tightly coupled, because this front end is so just for this back end. So it's okay when they have a contract like the Open API specification, for example. And so you evolve. So you learn something new, you evolve, you think about productivity, about maintainability, Yeah, and things are getting better and better. And at some point, you maybe think, I'm just reinventing the wheel every time I add something new. And this maybe is the point where you look at something like full stack frameworks, for example, because when you've gone the hard way of doing everything on your own, then at some point you maybe think someone else must have been down this way and someone else must have been thinking about this and came up with a brilliant solution. Then you can look at full stack frameworks, like, for example, full stack frameworks in the React world or full stack frameworks in the Java world. And then you will most likely discover that those full stack frameworks under the hood do a lot of the things you've just done by hand, for example. So, but in this case, when you're using a full stack framework, those things are covered for you. You don't need to handle them. And this is actually a very, very helpful thing, because using a very specialized full stack framework is helpful to reduce the amount of knowledge you need to have. Because a full stack framework, of course, it will be very opinionated. You need to know the full stack framework to use it right. That's for sure. But the full stack framework can help you a lot. For example, with all this code generation, with all the tooling, for example. So maybe you don't even need to touch something like NPM or Vite when you have a full stack framework, because the full stack framework can do everything for you. So you don't have to handle open API specifications. You don't have to do anything with a TypeScript configuration, etc., because a full stack framework like Hilla from Vaadin, for example, will do this for you. So full stack frameworks can help you, especially if you're a Java backend developer, to get into the full stack field without needing to know everything that is related to the full stack field, especially when it comes to front end. And this can actually help you a lot to become good at it, to have a good productivity, and to have not so much mental load because you need to understand everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we moved slowly into the field of, actually naming stuff,
Yeah.
giving names. Yeah.
Yeah.
So passwords, names, keys, whatever.
Yeah.
As we work primarily with Java, you mentioned Vaadin Hila. Um, I personally love Vaadin too, but I use Vaadin Flow because
Mhm.
again, I'm still in my backend waters, and so using Vaadin Hila for me right now would be more of a challenge. So I'm integrating front end into my backend, right? So you're writing front end in pure Java code. For big projects, I think that might be a bad decision, right? Because the complexity just grows. But for smaller projects or for demos, that's okay. Uh, I guess. I guess. So, could you please tell us a little bit more about Hila version of Vaadin, and maybe some other full stack frameworks that you like, that you use,
Mhm.
which we
Yes,
can
of course.
try out? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, Vaadin and Vaadin Flow, what you've just mentioned, is, from my perspective, a very, very good entry point if you're a Java developer and you
Yeah.
want to explore the full stack world.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that the size of the application you are building is somehow limiting or somehow limited when it comes to Vaadin Flow. Vaadin Flow can serve 10,000s of users without any problem. So there's no such thing as a performance gap here. This is more like an urban developer myth or mythos that Vaadin Flow consumes a lot of memory, but this is actually not the case. And you can also have a very huge code base and have many, many people working on it. So because everything you use to structure your Java projects, you can also use when you're working with Vaadin Flow. So you can argue that you can create big Java applications for microservices, for example, with thousands and thousands of lines of code. But you can do the same with Vaadin, of course, because Vaadin does not limit you in any way. So I wouldn't say that this is somehow something that you shouldn't use in big projects. And I've seen people and I've seen companies that build amazing products with Vaadin Flow, and you're good to go to do whatever you like with it. And when it comes to Hilla, for example, which is also part of the Vaadin company, it's a little bit different, because then you have a Java backend and a React front end, and you may ask yourself, well, when I like Flow, where I can create business web apps 100% in Java, why should I switch to something like Hilla, where I need to learn React? And that's a perfectly fair question, and I would answer that Hilla is not meant to be there to convert Java developers to become React developers. So it's not the purpose of Hilla to convince someone that React is a better choice when you already work with Java. So I think Hilla was introduced by Vaadin because the Vaadin company saw that React is a very, very popular library out there. So, for example, if you have a look in the recent Stack Overflow developer survey, or the survey from last year, and you look into the web technology section of it, then you will see that React is the most popular web framework or web library out there, at least according to this survey. And the same goes with programming languages like TypeScript or JavaScript, for example. They are all very, very popular. And if you are a large company or a mid-sized company, and you want to develop software, then you have to look onto the market, and you have to look onto the qualifications that people can bring into your company when they want to work with you in your company on the products. And when the market says that there are a lot of people with knowledge about React and with knowledge about things like TypeScript, for example, then as a company, you would usually like to onboard these people and to enable them to work with your Java guys on this new web app that you want to bring to your customers or to your employees. So Hilla is a very good framework when you want to combine this knowledge, when you have existing front-end knowledge, existing back-end knowledge, and you want to bring them together, especially when we're talking about a full-stack team where multiple people with different backgrounds work on the same team. If you are a single dev, a single freelance software engineer, for example, then choosing Hilla is maybe a bit special. As I said at the beginning, I learned React Native quite a while ago, and this was my way to getting to know React because I used React Native. And compared to the way you create UIs with Vaadin Flow and Java, I must admit that I really like the component model and component architecture of React, and the declarative way of how you describe the UI when you use something like React. And I just like it more compared to the imperative approach, how you code the UI when you do it in Flow. But this is just a personal opinion. So either one is fine. If it depends on your personal experience. So, but so these are those two, and they're not competitors. They are for different purposes, for different companies, for different backgrounds, but both can help you to be very, very productive and to build large-scale web apps. So just can recommend them. And you also asked about alternatives. I've mentioned a few earlier, but those are actually more React or TypeScript oriented frameworks, like, for example, Next.js or Nest.js or Remix. But when you choose to use them, you usually choose to have React and TypeScript everywhere. So TypeScript is the way you develop your backend, and TypeScript is the language you use in the front end. But if you are a Java developer and you want to use Java as well when you're building web applications, then there are not that much alternatives. What you can do is you can use tools like JHipster, for example, or something that's called Bootify. And JHipster and Bootify, they are both great to give you a quick set up in the beginning. So, for example, you say you would like to build a web app using Spring Boot and Java on the backend and TypeScript and React on the front end. Then you can use JHipster or Bootify, and you can just set up your project, and they will generate a lot of code for you. In a tool like Bootify, you can even specify your entities with a nice little editor in the web interface, and you can say that your entities even have some kind of relationship. And then this tool will generate a lot of Java code and a lot of TypeScript code for you. But the code that has been generated there is kind of isolated. So the front end and the back end is not that much integrated like you have it in a full stack framework like Vaadin Flow or Vaadin Hiller, for example. So if you use a generator like JHipster or Bootify, you usually end with a very good starting point, which is good for an MVP or for a prototype. But then when you would like to grow this application, when you would like to evolve on this application, then again, you need to have a very good understanding about the front end dependency management, about the front end tooling, the front end bundling, about all the front end functionality, as well as for the back end. So the productivity is, I think, a little bit smaller compared to Vaadin Flow and Vaadin Hiller, especially when you see it on the long term. Yeah. But yeah, these are the tools and the frameworks I know in this area. And yeah, have you heard anything? Do you know anything besides Flow, for example, or?
Well, right now I'm using so Vaadin Flow. Before that, I was using Thymeleaf for front end, but I can't say that I managed to become an expert in that. So yeah, Next.js. You mentioned Next.js, so I've heard about that. Didn't touch it yet. And as far as I know, Django is also for
Yeah,
full stack framework. So yeah, in a way.
of course.
Um,
If you take different technologies or different frameworks and programming language, then the landscape is, of course, huge. If so, Django, I think, is I don't know what's the primary programming language in Django, but I think it's not Java.
no,
So if you go away from Java, then of course you have a huge amount of frameworks you can choose from. But yeah, I was not thinking about this. I was just more thinking about the Java
yeah,
ecosystem. And
yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, when you talk about Thymeleaf, of course, I mean, if you work with Spring Boot in the back end, then of course Spring Boot also brings a lot to the table. So they have Spring Web MVC, they have Thymeleaf, so they do have something that you can use. But again, this is from my perspective maybe not the most productive approach to have something like a templating engine like Thymeleaf. It's maybe okay for small applications, but I think it can be
Yeah,
difficult for larger applications.
I so too. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but it's and
Yeah,
again, if you think about something like different patterns how to implement web applications. So what's very common nowadays is something like the single page applications, which is a very dynamic way to build dynamic UIs that feel very native to people that are using this, maybe like even a native desktop application, for example. And when you use something like JSP or something like Thymeleaf, you usually still have a more classical request response pattern where you submit something to the server renders the response on the server and sends back the response, and this response will be presented in the front end. And this maybe it's difficult to build the same kind of dynamic and very interactive UIs when you use a templating engine. But yeah, it depends on the situation. But I see we have a question. Sorry.
yeah. We have several, by the way. So there's a comment from Simon. I'm a fresher, but still recommend to write your own code. These code generators degrade you unconsciously. Thank you, Simon. That's actually a very good point. And I have sometimes this phobia. So
Mhm.
if I rely too much on AI generated code, then I will unlearn how to think for myself and how to solve complex problems for myself, how to write any code on myself. So I think there might be a risk, or maybe I'm paranoid. What do you think, Rene?
Well, no, I don't think so. And especially when it's code that you are not so familiar with, when it's in an area that you don't have a lot of experience, because as we've said previously, if you know your way around, if you're like more of a senior developer in a certain area, then it's easier for you to understand what the AI does, and it's easier for you to say, well, that looks good, or this is crap. So it's easier maybe for a senior developer to use it and to be okay with it. But if you are like an entry level developer or a junior developer in a certain field and you don't really know what is good code, what good code looks like, or what good architecture looks like in this field, then I would be afraid too, because there's not, you don't really have a chance to evaluate what's coming out of
Yeah,
this. It may work, it may looks good, because it compiles and you can run it, but it it's probably not going to be there on the long term, or you maybe have problems on the long term. And I've seen some posts or blog posts or some people writing about their experience using AI, and some say that this is very common 80-20 rule. I don't know if you know that, but you sometimes say you achieve 80% of the functionality with 20% of the budget or 20% of the time. But the remaining 20% of the functionality, to achieve that, you usually have to spend 80% of the budget or 80% of the time. So it just turns around. So the first part is easy and the rest is very, very difficult. And sometimes have the feeling it's the same with people that are using AI. So you give the AI a very general task to, for example, build a web application, to, I don't know, manage your bookmarks, and the result is fine. And then you start to iterate. And the more you iterate and the more you would like it to change, the more difficult it becomes. And this is maybe something that is then very scary to you, because at some point the AI can't even help you to adjust it
yeah,
anymore, because it doesn't know. It was
yeah,
not trained on this kind of instruction, or it has no idea. And then your product manager or your engineering manager is looking at you because you came up with it, and he or she says, well, it's just this little adjustment. Can you just please fix that? We would like to ship it tomorrow. And then you say,
yeah.
I have no clue. It is written in Django. I don't know the framework. So,
Yeah, that's a nightmare for sure. Sure. Have another question from Salihu. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Is JPro an option here? I'm not sure what you mean by JPro. Rena, do you know what that is?
no, I
Yeah.
haven't heard that. There's one Java framework I forgot to mention earlier, which is called WebJar. So
WebJar.
like,
Mhm.
yeah, WebJar. I haven't looked into it, but from my understanding, or what I've seen so far, it seems to be kind of similar to how Vaadin works, but it's a different company, it's a different framework. So maybe
Mhm.
this is also an alternative when you are in the Java ecosystem and you would like to develop web applications. But unfortunately, I don't know JPro. I haven't heard that, but I will have a
Yeah.
look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Salihu, maybe you could specify what exactly you mean, because I also have never heard of JPro. Maybe there's something new that we should explore. And then there is the question from Ainura. The competition in IT is very high. Does being full stack increase my chances of getting a job?
Mm.
That's a nice one.
I would say definitely yes, because when you know your way around, although in backend and front end, then you have a lot of knowledge. And if you are comfortable in developing things like a full stack engineer, then you can work as a backend engineer and as a front end engineer. Maybe not as a specialized, or maybe not as a senior backend or front end engineer, but you know the technologies that are involved. And I think it would be easier for you, because you could apply on a mm, wider range of job postings, because you know more. Because if you're just well, don't get me wrong, but if you're just a back-end engineer, you would usually not apply for something that is UI related because you
Mm-hmm.
maybe never touched something that is UI related, or you maybe wouldn't apply when there's something asked about React or Vite or TypeScript in the job advertisement. But if you are into full stack, then you've most likely already touched it and you've maybe worked with it. And then I think, then it's perfectly fine to apply for this and to give it a go. And from this perspective, I would say yes, it would definitely help you to get a job because there are more opportunities because you're not just one, you're both front end and back end.
But do employers understand and see full stack like developers do? Or is there a discrepancy between what employers want to get from full stack developer, like I
Yeah,
want you to do everything, and what the developer can actually do realistically?
unfortunately, this is the case. Yeah, this is very well disappointing in a way. But for example, if you look at salary reports, for example, so if you look at a salary report and you have these three categories of front end engineer, a back end engineer, and a full stack engineer, the possibility or the likelihood that the backend engineer is going to have the biggest salary is very high. So usually backend engineers have a higher salary than full stack engineers and front end engineers. So the full stack engineers, they do not sit on top because they know both. They sit somehow in between, and so this is something that employees or companies, they don't see the advantages they get. For example, as we've said previously, usually companies see or get a gain in productivity when they have a full stack team or when they have full stack developers. So being more productive means that you spend less money. Usually you spend less money to get the same output because you are faster on your way to the goal. So you could think that you could give the full stack engineers some of the savings because you've been more productive. But this is unfortunately not the case. So companies like full stack engineers because they are very flexible. You can put them on different kind of jobs, on different kind of tasks. But unfortunately, they do not value them that much because companies tend to value specialized people. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are in a bigger company, there's usually a career path to become a specialist in back end or a specialist in front end. And then at some point, if you are a senior Java back end developer, then you become an architect or principal or whatever. But this usually always means that you get specialized and specialized and specialized and specialized and specialized. But it's usually not that your knowledge gets broader and broader and
Mm-hmm.
broader and broader because you
Mm-hmm.
get more productive and productive and productive, and then you get more. This is usually not the case. So being full stack is not the holy grail when it comes to salary. Yeah.
Yes, so yeah. So we have a comment from Salihu. J Pro promises full featured web apps using JavaFX. Oh, that's
Oh,
nice.
that's something for you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I will add it to my list of technologies that I want
Yeah.
to explore. But yeah, I mentioned earlier when we talked with René that I love JavaFX. And
Yeah.
maybe if you've been following me for some time, you know that. That's my little hobby. So yeah, JavaFX is for mainly that is for desktop apps or for apps on embedded devices.
Mhm.
And web application bringing JavaFX to web sounds to me a little bit I don't know, maybe unnecessary, because for the web we have good frameworks tailored to the web. Like you can take the same Vaadin, for instance,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and leave JavaFX for desktop. And if you want to, you can write your application for the web, and then you can have the version with JavaFX. So you can combine them. There's kind of like microservices, but the one service is for desktop, the other is for the web. Some other services for mobile. Why not? And then in this case, that's going to be a very full spread version of the application. And I actually
Yeah.
wanted my next step with Vaadin. Well, apart from all the other things that I want to do with Vaadin, is I love it. I mean, like I've been digging into Vaadin with such joy and excitement that I even forget that I have to do some other things. That's so nice, because maybe because again I was a backend developer for a long time, and front end was for me something like mountain Everest or whatever. And
Yeah.
with Vaadin, that just comes through much easily, right? So with Thymeleaf, I remember I that was a torture to try and build
Hmm.
some kind of a good front end, and with Vaadin, it's like that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I love that about that. So yeah, and speaking about JavaFX and Vaadin, one of my steps that I want to do is to combine them somehow in one application. So the web version uses Vaadin, and it
Hmm.
connects to the JavaFX based version.
Yeah.
So and they transmit the information between them. So for instance, you have like constantly updating logs on
Mm.
the web. But if there is no internet connection, for instance, you can use this desktop version with the latest available logs, right? It's
Yeah.
not updated in real time because there's no internet, but at least you have the data before that point, the whole data, so you can use that. So it might be very useful.
Yes, yes. I think that sounds very good. And to get back to the idea of creating web apps maybe based on a JavaFX application, it may sound a little bit strange at the first point, but there are situations where you really want to do this, where you want to create kind of a universal app. Let's call it a universal app. So you want to create something that you can use on multiple different platforms. So now we've talked about desktop and web, but what about mobile? Or what about smart TVs, for example? Or what about
Yeah.
embedded devices? So maybe you have a need, and it depends on the company, it depends on what you're building. Maybe you have a need that you want to ship something that you want to ship to your users on a desktop, on a mobile, and on a web application, because your users are somehow very different from each other. They sit in different locations. Some have poor internet, some have good internet, some just have mobile devices, others don't even have a laptop, they just have a workstation whatsoever. And if you have this situation, then you usually come to, especially when you have a larger engineering organization, you usually come to the point where you don't want to implement the same kind of functionality for all those, let's say, front ends. So, for example, if you introduce a new feature, then you don't want to implement this feature for the web app, for the desktop app, and for the mobile app. You usually want to implement this feature once somehow, and
Hmm.
everyone should benefit from it in a way. And this is kind of challenging. And what you usually try to achieve is that you implement something on a, let's say, business logic layer, and then everything which is UI related sits on top of this business logic layer. So you don't have to implement the business logic again and again and again. You just implement it once. And all your UIs are connected to this business logic layer. And so you just have to implement the UI 3 times. But even this is kind of annoying, and maybe you don't want to do that. And for example, if you think of a company that produces something that is more customer facing, then you maybe want that all those 3 different UIs follow the same design system. They should look not exactly the same, but the font should be the same. The colors should be the same. The images you use should be the same. So you have kind of a corporate identity, and you want your apps to look like they are kind of identical on all 3 different platforms. And then I think something like maybe Java Pro is an example here can help you, because you have one single code base and you try to achieve as much as possible out of it to serve something that looks almost identical on a web, on desktop, and on mobile. And in an ideal world, you just have to implement a feature once and it's there on all 3 platforms. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, if we are speaking about diversifying the platforms and unifying the
Yeah.
stack, and if you work with Java, I can't help, well, being developer advocate for both of, I can't help but mention that Bellsoft develops and supports several versions of Liberica GDK for different purposes. We have Liberica GDK standard, that's just vanilla Java. We have Liberica GDK with JavaFX bundle, right? So you don't have
Mhm.
to add any dependencies to your project. We have Liberica Native Image Kit to create native images out of your Java apps, and Native Image Kit also has a bundle with JavaFX, so it is much,
Ah,
much easier to build native images out of JavaFX apps and distribute them like executables, like the regular executables or any platform.
yeah,
We also have Liberica Lite that is perfect for containers with Alpaquita, which is a teeny tiny Linux. And we have Liberica with the coordinate restore checkpoint support for instant startup of Java applications. So we have lots of things. So guys, friends, check it out. Why not? Because it's totally free. I mean, no ties, no vendor
yeah,
lock. Right, just try it out, and that's nice to
yeah,
unify the stack, the technologies. Right, when you have one runtime, for instance, for all your different needs, then there's at least from the part of the runtime, there's predictable behavior, predictable performance, something like that.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
would just like add one or two thoughts here because as a full stack developer that is also interested in DevOps and how things are going to production, especially all the things that you just mentioned regarding, for example, native image compilation. This can be very, very interesting, especially when you have to convince someone that it's not really a big problem to have a Java application up and running quite fast in a with a very, very small footprint in a, let's say, container environment like Kubernetes. So because I sometimes have this kind of discussions when I say, well, let's build a web application, but this web application has a Java backend, and some people say, "Oh, Java at the backend, it consumes so much memory,
Yeah, yeah,
and maybe
yeah.
it's insecure, and then we need a JRE on our base image, and we don't have a base image in our container environment with a JRE on it." This is something can be a little bit frustrating. But if you have a very good Java runtime environment, and you just mentioned one, then this is very helpful. Or you can even go further and you can just compile it to a native image, and then you have very fast startup, very well, not very low, but of course you have less memory consumption. And I also did this, for example, with web apps that were built with Vaadin Flow and
Mhm.
Vaadin Hilla. So this is something that they support as well. So if you would like to try that out and create a full stack web application with a Spring Boot Java backend and let's say a React and TypeScript front end, then you can just have it as one executable, which you
Yeah,
can actually ship everywhere.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and yeah, so this myth that Java is slow and memory consuming, well, it was a reality some time ago, but right now Java is perfectly well. So you just have to know how to cook it, so to say,
yes,
right? So
yeah.
yeah, there are the smaller containers, there are smaller lightweight Linux distributions like Alpine or Alpaquita. So the container is smaller. There are ways to decrease the Docker image size, and yeah, there is the native image part that is very exciting, and I love native image dearly because well, yeah, you get this executable that starts up almost instantly at peak performance, right? So there's no warm up, there's no excessive memory consumption, and yeah, that's just convenient to have just one executable that doesn't need a JVM to run because all the necessary parts of the JVM are already there.
Yeah.
Of course, native image, yeah, has its well, points to consider.
You-
So the building of native image might
yes,
take some time.
you need to be patient. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to be patient, right? And every time you introduce changes to your app, you rebuild the native image. So
Yes,
that's, yes, that's part of the deal. But then again, you
absolutely. Yeah.
enjoy this peak performance and fast startup
Yeah.
in the cloud. So that's great. Yeah,
Yeah. But
yeah,
we have
yeah,
a wide variety of technologies and tools we can choose from because you just mentioned the checkpoint feature,
yeah.
which is actually quite great. Of course, you need to if you change something significantly in application, you again need to create a new snapshot and create a new checkpoint, so to say. But if you don't like native images or you can't compile your applications to native images because you do a lot of reflection thing or whatever, then maybe this checkpoint feature is also very interesting to have a very fast startup time, because
Yeah. So checkpoint at Restore, this crack project with the name still makes me
yeah,
do every
it's
time. I mean,
difficult. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's so dangerous to write about crack on Twitter or Blue Sky without mentioning Java because you might be banned or something. Yeah, but yeah, so that's a very exciting feature. So it helps you, like with a video game, it helps you to pause your running Java app and then restore it from the exact moment it was
Yeah,
paused,
yeah,
and the application doesn't even start. So you won't see in the console starting the app, because for the app it continues from that point. It never
yes,
stopped. Actually, it's
yeah,
just wonderful. Although
yes.
there are some caveats also. but
Again, yes.
but even if you don't want to use native image, you don't want to use crack, but you want faster startup, there's Project Layden. So,
Yes.
and there are already some features introduced, and in JDK 25 there are going to be two more features introduced. So Project Layden is this painless way of improving the startup time, right? So
Hmm.
without sacrificing the well, your time, your nerves, or something that. Yeah, so that's just grab and go, kind of like that. So
Yeah,
it's compatible with any application. So that's great. Java has gone a very long way, and this is super exciting to have so many frameworks around it,
yeah.
solutions, tools, features. That's, oh my god.
And I think
Yeah.
everyone can maybe agree that even if you are a backend engineer or front-end engineer or full stack engineer, it's kind of interesting to explore this whole world of, let's, for example, this DevOps related topics we just talked about. And I think this is really great to extend your knowledge into these directions. And just to maybe to come back to where we started, full stack can be a very, very large topic, depending on where you set the borders. But one of the main challenges here is to stay curious and to not everybody maybe wants to become a full stack engineer, because I can understand that a lot of people think that this is too much. It's too difficult to stay up to date with the back end and the front end stuff. But for some people, it's kind of okay. And especially if you are evolving, if you started as a backend engineer and you've grown into this full stack role, and then you looked into DevOps because you think it's interesting, this complexity is not coming one day after the another. So it's not just there from 0 to 100. So it's just adding up a little bit time over time. And I think this is a very good path into this direction, that you just extend your existing knowledge. But when you start from scratch, it's the same like what we've discussed now. You need to find your way. You need to find your path to not just get overwhelmed by all the complexity and by all the different options you have. And yeah, to find a good starting point is always difficult. But yeah, maybe you have a good source or good documentation or videos like this on your channel, for example, or you find a very good productivity boosting framework like Vaadin Flow or Vaadin Hiller, for example, which can also help you to get into this without knowing all the details.
So, if there are any junior developers who are watching now or will watch it later, is it wiser to start your career as a full stack and then specialize in one field more, deepen the knowledge in one field, or you start with the backend or front end, specialize, and then add more and more skills from other sides, so to say?
Well, I've chosen the path of starting as a backend engineer and expanding into full stack. And if I had to do it again, I think I would start as a full stack, because having the knowledge about the whole stack is something that helps me a lot every day. And especially when it comes to all this AI things, all the generated code we've spoken about, it's easier to understand what the AI is doing if you have a broader knowledge. If you know a little bit about front end, and if you know a little bit about back end, and especially if you know how the things communicate with each other. And because often I've been in situations where I don't really understood why the front end people were crying so hard, because I didn't know what their job was, and I didn't know how this works, and I didn't know that my API design, for example, on the back end was poor, because the front end has to fetch so much data and they just need a little fraction of it. Or when it comes to things like authentication or encryption, for example, it's good when you know the communication between the backend and the front end. So getting into full stack and getting your way around there is something I would actually advise if you start new, but do not start from scratch on both sides. Try to get some help, for example, with a framework, as I said, or you try to narrow the scope a little bit. So don't try to become an expert in every area. Just try to become more like a generalist. Be more like a generalist that knows his way around the whole stack. And I think then you can deepen your knowledge wherever it is needed, depending on the project, depending on the requirements. But yes, I would go with full stack nowadays, and not again the backend path.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds exciting. Start broad, and then, well, if you have the inclining more for backend or front end, then just, I think you could just try everything and then choose, pick your poison. That's not okay. That's okay. That's not what I wanted to say, but that's just out of my mouth. Sorry. Yeah, picking the stuff that you like, and then go deeper there. But Rene, what do you think then in this case? What skills are absolutely necessary for any developer, regardless of whether he or she is a backend, front end, or full stack?
Well, especially nowadays, when you have a very strong coding agent always near to you, like Copilot or ChatGPT, I think some of the very important skills that you really need are communication skills. So one thing an AI can't do for you now is to talk to your clients or to talk to your customers. You could try to persuade your customers to talk to ChatGPT, but then they won't pay you because they get the solution out of ChatGPT. So it's your part to understand what users really want. And that's why you need to be able to communicate well. So communication skills is definitely something that is very important. And if I look back into my years at university, communication skills have not been on the agenda. So Java engineers or in general software engineers, not all of them are very great at communicating. So this is definitely something you need to learn in a way. And which is also related to communication is all the thing that is about requirements engineering. So to understand what someone really wants, not just to talk to someone, but also to understand what the problem is and to create a system design out of it. So maybe this is more important nowadays, to be able to communicate, to understand the requirements, and to write this down into a system diagram, or to write it down into a specification. Because when you have a very good specification, then you can give this to a coding tool, and this can generate a lot of the boilerplate code that you used to develop a few years ago. So nowadays you don't need to create a CRUD application in Java Spring anymore, because tools can do that a lot faster for you. So if you like, you can, but you don't actually have to. So doing this is especially important. And if it comes to more technical skills, because this requirement and communication are soft skills, and if it comes to more technical skills, I think skills like professional debugging are very important, especially when you use a lot of generated code. So if you use a lot of generated code, or code that has been generated by an AI, you need to understand the code, and you need to step through the code, because at some point you will not be able to instruct the AI to change the code any further. We've just talked about it. So there will be a point when you need to adjust the code. So you need to be good at reading a large code base that someone else wrote, in this case maybe an AI, and you need to be able to debug this source code. and understanding how a debugger works, setting breakpoints, inspecting variables, changing variables at runtime, looking at objects and stack traces, etc. This is something that becomes very handy because it helps you to understand what went wrong. And this is something that is maybe even more important than a few years ago, because we are all iterating very fast nowadays, and we all need to understand quite fast why things are going wrong. And so you need a debugger to understand this. And yes, these are just some of the advices, or some of the things I think that are very important nowadays.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And communication really is super essential, I think, in any profession. And in software development, well, that's a gap. I'm afraid, and I am not a software engineer as well as per my education. So I'm an interpreter, and communication was well, the most part of my life that I have to communicate well and in different languages. And so in this regards, I have communication skills, but I don't have like this deeper maybe understanding of the intrinsics of computing. And on the other hand, the software developers that I talk to, there's such a difference between the devs who might be like super fantastic, absolute geniuses, but they can't explain to you what they are doing, or they can't tell you what they want from you, or what the app should do, or why this feature is needed. And that's a little bit hard. And then there are developers who talk like, I don't know, like professional conference speakers, and some of them are professional conference speakers, but communication is there. I mean,
Yeah,
and it's so much easier to actually work on a team when people can talk to each other and discuss things,
yeah.
right? And that's super important. I think one more quality that I might add is curiosity. So the wish to understand how something works and to learn something new, right? So you might be um, working on in some field, in some very niche field for a very very long time, and then your skill set doesn't improve, doesn't grow, doesn't develop. And so in the case you have to shift from this niche field to some other field that might be too complex, because your skill set is not tailored to some other work on the one hand, and on the other hand you don't have this flexibility, right? You don't know how to adapt rapidly, and how to learn new technology, at least the basics of a new technology, really really fast, yeah, to be able to ship something already
Yeah.
useful in the early stages of learning, of mastering this tech. So yeah, I think yeah,
I agree. Yes, I agree. And I think Java is a perfect example here. On one hand, there are fundamentals that are not changing over time, but it's very important that you understand some of those fundamentals. But again, the whole ecosystem is evolving, which means you need to stay curious, and you have this
yeah,
kind of a lifelong learning period where you always discover something new, and where it's always required to stay up to date. And this is not the cup of tea for everyone. I know that, and I know people that are fine with their very specialized knowledge in an area that is not much changing or evolving, and that's fine too. I respect those people too, because they see their work as their work, but they maybe have other interests which are more not programming related or engineering related. They have other things and skills that are important for them. But again, if you are going into full stack, which is a broad field, you should be curious, definitely. And one thing I would like to add to the list of things you should look at is a very good understanding about things like patterns, or so
hmm,
architectural patterns, or maybe even how some kind of protocols work. These are fundamentals, so that those things are not changing very fast, but it's a very good foundation, a very good
yeah,
foundation which you can build on top of. Because for example, if you know if you know some architectural patterns for web applications, for example, then it's a lot easier for you, for example, to describe what maybe an AI should do, because an AI is not very good at understanding or introducing patterns. So an AI, sorry, is good in writing a lot of code, but you, at least nowadays, you need to tell the AI a little bit more about how to structure your code, how to which kind of patterns it should apply. It should apply, especially when it comes to things like separation between the front end and the back end. So understanding how applications should be built in a way that the architecture should be. This is especially helpful when you have something like full stack development, which you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if we summarize our session, how would we answer the question? So, is a full stack a myth or a mastery in the end of the day?
Well, for me, it's a mastery, but I've gone all the way, so
Yeah,
I can understand that it looks a little bit different, or it was different at the beginning. But I would invite everyone to go on this journey and to have a look, because it is a really fruitful journey, and it's great to see what you can build when you own the whole stack. So you don't have to wait for others. You can move fast. You can build things. You can break things if you like, but you are the one in charge, or your team is in charge, and you can develop end to end, and you can deliver end to end. And this is something that is a source for so much energy and productivity, and it gives me a lot of joy to be able
yeah,
to deliver things end to end, because it makes me happy when I see that people are happy because they can use a feature they required or they requested. And when I was able to deliver this to them end to end, then I'm happy too.
yeah. And even if you don't want to go all the way full stack, again, I think you should test the waters on the other side, on the
Mhm.
front end or the back end, because even if you don't want to work as a full stack, you will get more understanding of what's going on on the other side, and maybe you can build your code, do your part of the job in a better way, because you have a deeper understanding of the whole project, and that's like
Absolutely.
super important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's again the communication part, right? Yeah, if you know a little bit more about the back end or the front end, then it can help you when you're communicating with colleagues in your team or with partners, because you know a little bit about their job, and this helps a lot when you have to communicate about specifications or features or problems. And this is again, yeah, the communication skill we've talked about. So
yeah.
this helps. This helps definitely.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Rene, for this deep dive into full stack. That was so exciting. I have so many more questions, but we've been here for so much time, and I think I tired you out completely. So thank you everybody who joined us and who stayed with us. Rene, could you please maybe post the links to your socials where folks can find you and maybe ask questions, connect to you, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, your site? You can post that in our private chat, and then I'll repost it into the comment section.
Absolutely, yes. And
Yeah.
yeah, I would also like to say thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for the discussion and the questions, and thanks for the comments in the chat. It was very nice to be part of this. And I'm not exhausted. I could go on talking, but I'm a
Yeah.
little bit hungry now because it's time for dinner, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was really great to be here. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
that's nice. That was so nice. Are you going to attend any conferences in the nearest future so that we could connect with you live? Real
Um,
life.
Yes, there are three conferences. I will be at the Vaadin Create. No surprise, because I'm a Vaadin champion, so I will be at Vaadin Create, which will be in Frankfurt in Germany in October. And I will be on two more conferences in Germany. One is the WJAX or the WJAX, which is in Munich. I think it's in November. And then I
November.
will be
Mhm.
on the IT Tage, which is also a German conference, again in Frankfurt, which is in December. And I have one or two applications for other talks, but they are not confirmed yet. So let's see. But yes, and if you are able to attend one of these, please come by to the talk. Let's have a chat. I will be talking about full stack development there.
Yeah.
I will be talking about all this hassle between front end and back end and how you can be more productive. So it will be an extension to this talk. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. But we had like a very, very prolific talk. I mean, you can just take some bullet points out of it into your
Maybe I
into
do
your
that.
talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some part of the work is already done, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, yeah. Well, again, thank you so much, René, for this conversation. Thank you, everyone who attended, who joined us, and until next time, till next stream. Everybody have a nice day. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.